Welcome to Radiator Comics Studio. Tonight's program is an installment of our Nuts and Bolts series, in which cartoonists who have a connection to South Florida talk about their practical approach to various aspects of making comics. This week, we're talking about writing comics with writing duo Bear and Bee, comics writer and publisher Jamila Rowser, and the cartoonists Drew Lerman and Luke Stewart. My name is Neil Brideau. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I run Radiator Comics, which distributes handmade and small press comic books, zines, and graphic novels. Radiator Comics Studio is a series of programs and publications that we are producing to support and grow the community of cartoonists here in South Florida. This program is made possible with support from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. We're grateful for their support, as well as the support of Oolite Arts and the Miami Foundation. Like I said, Radiator Comics Studio is intended to be a venue for South Florida residents who are making comics or who are interested in comics, regardless of their experience level, to come together and grow our community and to connect with the national scene. And while COVID-19 prevents us from physically gathering, Radiator Comics Studio is still centered in this place that we call home. And in that spirit, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we live and work and create on, and acknowledge the indigenous people who have been and continue to be caretakers of this land. In South Florida, we live on land of the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes. The Tequesta were also caretakers here for a couple thousand years. It's also important in South Florida to acknowledge the labor of African American, Bahamian, and Haitian people in building the area. The land we live on is stolen land, and the labor we benefit from is stolen labor. Acknowledging the land and its caretakers and the violence we benefit from is one step towards justice, as is learning about the whole history of where we live. I also wanted to say that Radiator Comics Studio is intended to be a venue through which a lot of different ideas are discussed, from practical conversations like tonight's to more philosophical discussions about comics, but also about how we as a community can work toward equity and justice within and outside of our comics community. It's an ongoing process full of both public and personal work and accountability to each other. So we're working on being a part of that conversation and the work, and are learning and adapting, and want to encourage you to reach out to us if you have thoughts about how we can be a better resource for a just future. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank our presenters for tonight's event. I'm really looking forward to this. This week we're talking about writing comics, which for folks who haven't made their own comics, it can kind of be tough to wrap your head around exactly how comics are written, since it's as much a visual medium as it is a literary one. So hopefully this will be illuminating. And as I'm sure we're about to see, everyone who writes comics has their own way of doing so. So we have a great mix of folks who, some exclusively write comics and partner with artists to draw those comics. Some folks write and draw the comics. And a number of our presenters also write in other media as well. So we're in for a real variety of techniques and ideas about writing. Each presentation is about 10 minutes in length. Afterwards, we'll have time for questions and discussions. Your mics are muted for the presentations. And when we get to the conversation portion, you can write your question in the chat or raise your hand in the participant section of your Zoom screen for us to unmute you, and you can ask your question verbally if you would like. I actually forgot to ask the participants about this, but I'll just say it anyway. As a disclaimer, some content in this presentation might not be appropriate for all ages. So I'm going to introduce the speakers now in the order in which they'll be presenting, and then I'll hand the mic over to them. So our first presenters are Bear and Bee. They are writers and publishers of several comics, including And Help Us to Rebuild the Sky, Sun Grazed, and Rebuild the Sky, Broken Stars. They are based in Miami-Dade County. Jamila Rowser is a writer and publisher known for her debut award-winning comic Wash Day, illustrated by Robin Smith, who we're honored to have with us tonight as well. And Jamila's press is Black Jose Press, which publishes comics for and by women of color. Luke Stewart is a Miami-born comic artist, designer, and musician. Since 2015, Luke has been merchandising his artwork primarily through prints and apparel. He's the author of 2 one-shot manga, My Friend Jeffrey and Homeroom. And our final presentation will be Drew Lerman. Drew is an artist living in Miami. He writes and draws the comic strip Snake Creek, which he posts regularly on Instagram. So welcome to Jamila, Luke, Drew, and Bear Bee. And I'm going to unmute Bear Bee, and they're gonna take over the mic. So you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes. Hello. Hello. First, we want to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and for Neil for hosting all of this. And we probably shouldn't have free range, but we'll see if we abuse it or not.
We're going to go ahead and share our screen.
Okay.
Here we go. Oh my gosh. All right.
Can you see it?
Everyone good? Thumbs up? All right.
Okay.
So writing pictures, controlled chaos. Beeku Comics is the brand that we publish under, named after her and our artist.
Beeku, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So who are we?
We are a writing team that has created 8 comics and web comics. We have our main comic, which is And Help Us to Rebuild This Guy, which we've had a successful Kickstarter for, and also for Sungrays, which is like the prequel to it. So we just want to go ahead and get right into it.
So in terms of inspiration and influences, there's of course the big names, Marvel, DC, and the writers like Matt Fraction, Mike Mignola, and Kieran Gillen. But we also have lots of friends in the industry, and they're more of who pushed us into this field.
Right, and so shout out for some of our friends. We've got these are all people who have published indie comics, and their writing style has definitely influenced our own, because they were the people who we learned from, especially with Boden and his comics. He has a film background, so he writes it more like a script for a movie, and so that was sort of how we started. But then we've since evolved our own process as well.
All right, so just I guess a little introduction. There are different ways to write a script, right? So one of the main ways is it's called modern or full script. It's used by a lot of the big publishers. You break it down by page, and then you break it down by panel, a little summary of what it is, and then the dialogue. This is just an example page. And then there's also this style. It's called the Marvel method. It was first used by Stan Lee. It's basically you just describe what's happening on the page, and you figure everything else out later. This is actually a page from Matt Fraction's Hawkeye run. And what style that you use really depends on on your artist.
Right. Are you your own artist? Are you working with someone? We work with somebody who her first language is not English, and so just writing a bunch of descriptions doesn't always help her. So we have to definitely have visual aspects to it. And I think the next slide is actually how we do ours.
Yeah. And I know Matt Fraction actually says that the way that he writes, he tailors it to his artist. So while he does it like this for this artist, he does it completely full script for another. So our way of writing is sort of a combo of the two. We have our little description of what's going on the page. It's more like a prose. And then we have the breakdowns of the panels and the different scenes.
Right. just because the expressions are so important, and so like the artist, she'll want to know the beats, like, you know, what we want to express in that page is not just by dialogue, but like what emotions do we want to portray, and how does the person who is speaking them, how do they really feel about those words? So that's more important to her, and also in a visual medium like comics.
Yeah, and then our scripts are usually like a depository for everything that we could ever need for it. So we also have coloring notes, and then we have links to our layouts and our character designs and references. So after we get the script, we then look for references. Sometimes we know exactly what we want, and we find a picture, we give it to our artist, or sometimes we have to go on Pinterest and just sort of waste hours finding.
That's just you.
Oh yeah.
But we sort of do it two different ways. One is more like a mood board, which is the Pinterest surfing, I would say, and then if I want like a specific thing to look a certain way because it's going to help the story, I will add that specifically like in a Google Doc for our artist.
And this really helps, again, because her first language is not English. She actually lives in Spain, so it's important to have visuals to help with communication.
Communication is very key.
Yeah. All right. So then after we get the references, the script, everything, artist makes a thumbnail, and this is the thumbnail, and then we test out how the bubbles are going to look on the page. And
yeah, words aren't any good if you can't fit them in there.
Yeah. And usually we don't change much of the art. We usually just change the words to fit.
Right, which is sort of how we do a mix of script and Marvel method. Like, we're like, okay, well, this art is really good, so let's just change the words.
Yeah. Let's make it.
Yeah.
All right. And then
the final page.
The final page. Ta-da! Okay. Yay. Whatever.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Oh, did you want to talk about tapas?
Oh, so in terms of tapas, with how the bubbles work and how a visual medium like a comic will work.
Tapas is a webcomic
right.
website.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah, sorry. Tapas.io is a web comic site, and so usually instead of it being like a traditional page, it's like a scroll, and you scroll up with the panels, and so like being able to make panels and artwork that you can then edit into something that a person can consume on a digital platform has been really helpful. Like, we do both.
Yeah, and what we usually do is we just chop up the page into little panels and then scroll. And then, so we knock two birds out with one stone, basically. We have the webcomic, and then we have the actual, like, traditional comic.
Right, but we love birds and we don't want it.
Well, no. Okay, all right. So, should I use this style? Pros. It allows more creativity for the artist. Lets the artist know what the most important details are. Cons, it's a lot of unnecessary details. Some artists don't want that much freedom. It's sort of chaotic, neutral. And conclusion, do what works best for you.
Yeah. And if you are your artist, then more power to you. We
tried that for a while. It didn't pan out.
It didn't work out well. But if you're in more of a team setting, again, just communication is key, and also like constructive criticism. Not only to, like, our artist has told us many times different ways that we can help her out, and that is extremely important to us. You know, it's about like a fused vision if you're working with an artist.
And then just some resources and self-promotion. So comicexperience.com/scripts. This has a bunch of scripts from people who are working in the industry. Like, I know Brian Michael Bendis has stuff on there. Fraction. Not Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck? What?
Craig, yeah, whatever. Anyway, Making Comics has pretty much anything that you could ever wonder about how to do comics. It's a wonderful resource. Different articles, and then it breaks it down by like cost and experience that you need.
Yeah, what is it about, yeah.
And then there's some Reddits here. Comic book,
Different books we've read.
yeah, comic book collabs is really good. Like you can go on there and say, hey, I'm looking for an artist. Sometimes they're paying gigs, sometimes they're not. And Words for Pictures by Brian Michael Bendis, and Making Comics by Scott McCloud is sort of like the textbook for making comics, right? That's why, yeah, that's why it's called that. And then this is our stuff. This is me, this is her, this is us. And this is our website.
I think we're good. We're good. All right, we're gonna stop now. We're so sorry. Okay, stop share. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks so much. I loved just like the, just like that idea of taking a bunch of different ways of communicating your ideas and like using them as like a whole like menu of information rather than just like, this is how it's going to look. That was fantastic. So our next speaker is going to be Jamila Rowser. And I'm unmuting Jamila. And Jamila, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes.
All right. And then, there you are.
Here we go. All right. You can see my screen? Cool. All right. So there will be some stuff that you just heard, which is fine and cool. So yeah, I'm Jamila Rowser, and let me minimize this real quick. And yeah, be talking about writing comic books. So before getting into that, I do want to talk a little bit more about myself. So I am a writer and a publisher. So I published comic books under Black Jose Press, which is a publisher that focuses on amplifying comics by and for women of color. And my first comic was Wash Day, which Neil mentioned, illustrated by Robin, who is here with us during the panel right now. And Wash Day is a slice of life that highlights the beauty and endurance of Black women and their hair. And some awesome news that just came out was that Robin and I announced that Chronicle Books is going to be publishing a graphic novel version of Wash Day, which is really cool and really wild. And then we have Waffle 3000, which was illustrated by Sabby Borno. It's a sci-fi twerking tale that was written by myself, of course. And then I co-wrote with Jamar Souza a comic that was in Real Folks Blues, a Cowboy Bebop fan book. And it's called Ragtime Blues, and it was, written by Nick Dragata. Sorry, it's illustrated by Nick Dragata. And then I've also published with Neil in Radiator Comics, Sun and Sand, South Florida-based comic book anthology. And in there I did As Above, So Below by Karina. And coming up, possibly next year, is a Goon Goon, which is going to be illustrated by Samantha Wade. And then a Little Esperanza, which is going to be in Mañana, a anthology. So the tips that I'm going to talk about are going to be more focused on like the technical aspects of comic book script writing versus like story development and things like that. So a lot of these things will probably be more helpful for new writers, but I mean, I still feel like I'm a new writer, and it's been a couple years, and I constantly remind myself of these things too as I'm writing. So the first thing is to be mindful of what you're asking the artist, and that kind of breaks down into a couple of different things. So when you're working on your panels specifically, thinking about how many actions a character is taking in that specific panel, like how many verbs are associated with one character in one panel. That'll kind of tell you if if the character is doing too many things and it's not technically possible for them to do it in the panel. Or so it's like, you know, saying a character is reading a book and also on the phone and also cooking, like just remembering that this is one picture and you can only show so many actions from one character at a time. And it's the same thing for page, like looking at the page and seeing like, am I asking for too much to fit on this page? Like how much information do I want to fit on here? Is that the amount that should fit on here? Maybe it should be spaced out. It depends on your pacing. So it's really just like thinking about those things as well. Another aspect of being mindful of what you're asking the artist is how much labor is involved with some of the art descriptions and panel descriptions. So like, do you have a lot of crowd scenes going on in your comic? If so, like you should maybe think about that, because that is a lot of work for an artist. Even going into like very, you know, technical spaceships or things like that. Like think about the labor that is involved with like the different elements of that, you know, comprise your story. Something that I do that helps me a lot is thumbnailing my scripts. So I cannot draw very well at all. And if you look at my thumbnails, they make no sense, but it helps me like visualize the pacing, and also make sure that what I want to be on the page makes sense to be on the page. So I always do like several versions of thumbnails as I'm doing working on a script. So then reference images, yes, pictures worth 1,000 words. Whenever you're describing something, especially if it is not a common object or thing that you're asking the artist to draw, add a reference image. Like it will make their lives easier. They can't read your mind, and you will make sure that you're getting that the art that you're asking them to do is going to be as accurate as possible. I also do this for moods. Like sometimes it's hard for me to explain an expression well or a mood well, and so I will add like a reference image of an expression that kind of better illustrates what I'm trying to say. And then I also do folders of like, if I'm thinking about like if I have mood boards, or if it's maybe the aesthetic of the comic or room inspiration for a character, like I'll do Pinterest boards or just a folder with a bunch of images. So that's another thing. And then something that I do too, because a lot of specifically like for wash day, there's like a lot of tutorials. I would also link to videos, because I felt like in addition to seeing, you know, a screenshot of somebody doing their hair, seeing a video, I think will help the artist kind of see all the different options they can do when illustrating that scene. All right, walk through the script with the artist. So I always like to have a meeting with the artist before they start working on the art, so I can walk through the script, talk about my vision, and also give them a chance to really ask questions before they start on it. So if you can give your script in advance, it's even better, because then they have time to read through it and then mark notes and things, any questions that they may want to chat with you about. Consider a sensitivity reader no matter the comic subject. So I say no matter the comic subject because I think sensitivity reader, or just just seeing it as another pair of eyes, or having an expert read your comic, and making sure it's not problematic, it's culturally accurate, it's not insensitive in any way. There's so many reasons why it's a good idea to have somebody else read your comic outside of just being problematic. But also, like, you don't know what unconscious biases you have, so it's really important to get a sensitivity reader to look at your work, because even if you're talking about a subject that falls within a community that you're a part of, you really don't know if you still may say something offensive or problematic without realizing it. Something that I did for a Gungun is I reached out to 2 experts to make sure that the comic, which was depicting African masquerades, was accurate and not offensive or in any of that. And there were things that I had included in the script that I thought was fine, and I realized, like, wow, that there's a lot of like unknown sort of things that have crept into my life from society and stuff. So those sensitivity readers can really help you just check your comic before it goes out there. And then I also like to use the script as a suggestion instead of rules for the artist. So just really like having trust in the artist to know what's best for pacing and stuff like that. Like I trust the artists that I work with to know, you know what, Jamila, you thought this was gonna take 6 panels, but actually it would be better with 4. Like that's cool. I want them to feel like they have this artistic license to change things and improve on things. And so I always say that in the beginning because it will make the comic better for it. And then last but not least is get an editor. If you can get an editor, you will learn so much. It will make your comic better, and it will help you in turn create better comics in the future because of what you learned through editing. And there are affordable ways to work with an editor too. Like you can perhaps just ask them to do like a once over read and give general feedback, or only pay for 1 or 2 hours or something like that. So there are options that are more affordable if you cannot afford to have a editor stick with you for, from the beginning to the end of comic production. And that's it. Any questions?
Well, thanks so much. Those are great. I feel like you use the term in your first slide, but like all of those things were so very like mindful and like caring to the person that you're collaborating with. And like I feel like so often there's kind of like this idea that like maybe like you write the script and then you hand it to somebody and they just draw the thing. And so that was really great to see that care that you put into the way that you prepare.
I care so much. Yeah. No, it's true. And I think it's something that isn't talked about as often, even if it may be something a lot of us do. So yeah, chill on the crowd scenes for artists. I'm sure a lot of artists would be happy that I said that.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Jamila. Next up, we have Luke Stewart. I'm going to unmute Luke, and you should be able to unmute yourself and take it away.
God. Okay, instant anxiety. Wow. Okay, so I guess I'll start with sharing my screen. All right, so let me know when you guys can see everything. Or Neil, I guess, let me know when you can see everything. Sorry, everything good? Okay, cool. So I didn't create a PowerPoint because I'm going to just kind of go over my general variances and processes. I don't really have a one way that I do things, which is kind of problematic and very useful mutually sometimes. So first I'm going to touch on the methods I employed for my, I think it was 22 to 24 pages, not sure exactly. It's called Homeroom. It's a comic I released last year. It's pure nonsense for the sake of nonsense with dramatic undertones. And admittedly, when I started this, I had no idea where I was going. But I like where it ended up, and I kind of, it was a fun experiment of kind of like, I forget the stream of consciousness. It's just like writing as you go and what you feel, kind of just like the way that I kind of create when I make music. So I kind of separated myself from scripts and from like being too hard on myself with following panel to panel with storyboards, which is something that I generally am very firm on with myself. So here in Clip Studio, I have some of the storyboards. I'll actually get to this. This is a storyboard drawn by a collaborator that one of my good friends of mine, Ray, who helped me out. So this is 2-page spread. Can you see that fine? Like, is it, let me collapse that. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Is that fine, or is that too, oops. That's okay. All right. So this is, I literally just kind of draw and see where it goes. And if I like it, then I go forward. And if I don't, in like 6 to 12 pages, then I just scrap it and do something else until I get like 6 to 12 pages of something else I like. Keep in mind, this does read right to left, like manga. So yeah, so I'll just go here. This is first 2 pages. That's what the next 2 pages look like. And the next 2 after that. And I kind of just run with it for this run. This is actually taken directly from the print edition of the book, so I had some commentary because I couldn't find page 7, so I just put text there. And then I didn't really like where I was going with the story. I had about 3 different drafts, so I hit up my good friend Ray N, who's one of my best friends who draws comics out in Georgia. And I was like, Ray, I want you to just do whatever you want with this, but call me as you're drawing it. So Ray and I got on the phone, and he would just be like Ray has this great tendency to just like be able to poop out anything he wants, which I am the total opposite of. So I thought it would be fun to have that dichotomy there. And we were just on the phone literally as he was just drawing. He was like, "Is this cool? Is this fine?" And he would just send me like a quick sketch, and I'd be like, "Yeah, do that. Go with it." And I kind of pieced everything together afterwards. In I actually want to show you guys something really quick. One second. So I took Ray's storyboards and I wanted to reinterpret them because generally speaking, from my storyboards, I just ink right over those. Like I'll blow them up on the computer and just ink directly over without doing like a refined pencil draft. But in the case of, when my friend Ray drew storyboards, like that's not my art. So if I trace it, it's not really, it's kind of like plagiarizing with permission. So I'm not going to do that. And it also just wouldn't look right. So here, I'll see if I can get the 2 pages like right next to each other. And I'll show you the one that I'm holding in my hand alongside. So the one on the right is the one I'm holding in my hand. That's the pencil version. So I took, Ray's storyboard and I just did my own little quick draft of it and then scanned it in. I did that for about 2, 4, 5 pages. Now I remember Jamila mentioned like be kind or be considerate to the artist. I have a tendency of like sabotaging myself with my backgrounds because I love doing detailed backgrounds, and it's really problematic because I'll spend 2 weeks on one panel. It's like, for example, this one, I just put city skyline. And I was like, oh, since I could draw that, I could do it. But then when I actually went to doing it, I had to go through like a ton of photos in my camera roll, and basically like, since this comic was sort of just stream of consciousness, I had no real setting. Like I had no real, generally speaking, like if a comic takes place in a set amount of places, I'll have to like go scout for location and do like sometimes 3D models in SketchUp and make sure like all the locations are consistent with each other. But for this one, like all of it took place in a classroom except for like the last, like, I think 3 pages or so. So I was really able to just like go pick like the coolest background that would give me like the biggest headache and just go ahead and do that. So I took from city skyline to, I just ended up with that, which was like a Manhattan reference photo. And when I draw, like I draw on the iPad, so I blow it up really, really big. But I need to get more considerate because like I have a tendency to just like hurt myself and waste time. So I need to get better about that. Neil, how much more time do I have? I should have started a stopwatch.
You've got about 4 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna run then. Okay, so that's homeroom. That was my disastrous process for that. This next one is a 22 or so page comic, or exactly 22 pages now. It's a comic I've been writing for about 3 years, and I've had about 4 different drafts for it. One of them was an animatic draft with animation and everything, and then I decided that I'm just going to draw it as a comic. So it's a little bit of a disaster, but it initially started off as just this, and I was really bored one day. I just started kind of drawing for the sake of it. Really hard to tell what's going on. Basically, getting off the train, going down the stairs, pausing, talking. I'm just going to run through this really quick. And as you can see, there's like all different splotches of spots from different drafts, and you can see my art style changed a lot over like 3 years. So it's a very weird, disastrous process. And so what I did recently was this was like, I think 4 months ago or something. Actually, no, we're in June now. Well, I need to move faster. I have these actual, give me 1 second. I have a folder. I think this is good. That's my, give me 1 second. Sorry for my desktop. So let's go through here. This is a folder I'm doing for this little contest grant I'm entering. So let me just go through here. I have all of my pencil pages here. So I could just show you guys where it went from there. So from the storyboard, is it not opening? Oops. Yeah, there you go. So it goes from the storyboard to the pencil draft. And there are a lot of variances. Again, it went from like, I think 14 pages. So I'm so sorry about this. To like, now it's 22 pages. So this has more or less just been a series of kind of figuring it out as I go. And now I'll show you some inked pages. So this is where I'm at now with some of them. So from sketch to pencil draft to illustration. And even from pencil draft, this is what's interesting is I really have an issue with committing to a certain angle or a certain number of panels, because even once I got to the pencil draft, you can see like on the middle left panel there, I changed the angle like entirely. And I also decided like as this girl, like spontaneously, like 3 years after I conceptualized the comic, I decided like this girl who's turning into this disgusting like gush monster is gonna get dark hair as she's transforming. Which is like something, it's like so silly and superhero sounding, and I'm just gonna see how it goes. But again, it's total nonsense, and just nonsense for the sake of it. And I'm not gonna go too in depth with this right here, but there is a graphic novel I'm writing, and for this I'm doing an entire script with dictation describing each scene, kind of like a screenplay with quotations and the character's name and colons, like you would have with video game dialogue. And this is out of consideration for future me, to make sure that when I do draw like a 200-something page book, I do not change things halfway through, because that's not going to work if I have to redraw all that. So yeah, that's my disastrous process for all my things.
Cool. Thanks,
How
Luke.
does Zoom work?
I think
I can be here.
button up
Oh,
at
how
the
do I
top.
stop sharing my screen?
There's like a red button up at the top of the screen, I think.
Oh, there we go. Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I like seeing this, like it was very intuitive, like feeling your way through things, and then also like being able to like being open to like I feel like there's like a great theme going on here of like collaboration with
just kind of even collaborating with myself, like the writer part of me and the artist part of me, kind of meeting halfway and figuring that out. So
yeah, nice. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So, and our final presenter tonight is Drew Lerman, and I'm unmuting Drew. You should be able to. Do we have Drew?
Yes.
Hello.
Thanks so much, Neil. And, thanks to Bear and Bee and Jamila and Luke. My name is Drew Lerman. I make the comic strip Snake Creek, which I publish on Instagram. I've been doing it for a couple years now. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's more like once a week, just depending on the craziness going on in my life at a given time. So my method for the strip is improvisational, meaning when I sit down to draw and write the comic, I'm really not sure at that moment what is going to happen. So this approach definitely creates limitations, and it makes it really not so much about what you think you want to make, but what you can make right now. So if you want to make a comic about a train, but you really don't like drawing trains and you don't know how to, that's you're just not gonna with this method. So it's not, the approach isn't for everybody, but for me it's definitely been really revolutionary in my process. My background is in creative writing. That's what I studied in school. I had a novel published when I was very young, but at a certain point, it really just stopped being fun for me, and I became very burnt out on it. I felt like I could revise a story forever, revise a sentence forever, and never be satisfied with it. When I decided to kind of take a break from fiction writing and focus more on comics, I was having more fun, but a lot of those same feelings stayed. You plan something out, you thumbnail it, you script it, you pencil it, you spend a tremendous amount of time working on it. And, for me, at least, it never quite lives up to, the idea that you've been hoping for, which is very frustrating. So almost 3 years ago, my first daughter was born. I had less time than ever. My artwork wasn't giving me that much pleasure, and I was definitely in kind of a funk artistically. I decided, let me try an approach that's purely spontaneous and fun, and really just for myself. Don't worry if it's a masterpiece or great. Just make a daily comic strip, and if it's really dumb and really terrible, it doesn't matter, because you'll just do another one tomorrow, and maybe that one will be okay. So I find this method to sort of be like a performance. Every line that you make on the page is permanent. You got one shot to do it. So, like an actor on stage, you really want to be fully present in that moment. And if I lay down a line that's really bad, I have to find a way to incorporate it into what comes next. So if you think of like two improv actors on stage, and one, puts out a line that just seems like it's not funny and it's just going to ruin the whole sketch, it's the job of the person opposite them to rescue that line and make it work. And so that's something that I think is part of my process too, just accepting what's there and trying to work with it and sort of riff off of it to make it work. So, the stakes are high in some ways and low in some ways. The stakes are high because, every line, you're stuck with, but they're low because, it's a daily comic, and it's just a comic you're posting on Instagram. Who cares? You'll do another one tomorrow. And that method has worked for me, and it's made the comic strip that I'm doing now, Snake Creek, really the most satisfying artistic project of my life so far. So I've used this approach for like one-off strips that are just about one little idea. I've used them for strips that take place over very long arcs where I just sort of improvise week by week. So from there, I think I'm going to do a screen share and do a little presentation. So let's see, here we go. Are we screen shared? I think. View, present, okay. All right. So I thought we could go through a recent comic of mine, just sort of as it came together, like a time lapse. I'm just going to go sort of blow by blow of how this came together. So for Snake Creek, I use a 4-panel grid. I find that when you're improvising, it's very helpful to have certain restrictions, like a fixed grid. You could think of like a jazz musician that's sort of riffing within, a standard song. That's, the function that the grid really has for me. So now this is panel 1, the hardest part, the first panel, nothing to riff off of. You want to put something down as quickly as possible to really escape the horror of nothingness. So I threw down a title and a character almost randomly. Just wanted to get something on the page as fast as possible to have something to like work off of. This is my character Dav. So from there, I added these two characters, Ep, the little guy in the front, and Pep, the guy in the middle. So this strip that we're looking at right now is part of a longer arc. So I sort of know what I'm dealing with in terms of these characters. So really quickly, Dav is trying to be accepted into their swamp commune, but Ep, this little guy in the front, isn't too keen on it. He's a little hostile towards Dav. So that's the place I'm coming from. I knew I wanted a little back and forth here between Dav and one of these. I left a little space, as you can see. You know, as Bear and Bee mentioned, you know, the writing in comics is really a design element. It has to fit in that space that you've left for it. At this point, I have these three figures in the front, a little tree in the background. I do not know what I'm going to put here yet at this point, but it's time to think of something. So I throw in, how long have you been living in the swamp? And give him something to say. Immediately upon laying this down, I think, oh my God, I don't want to say how long they've been living in the swamp. I want to kind of keep that ambiguous, but here we are. I've done it. I've done this to myself. So, so the desire to evade the question that I'd accidentally set up for myself to answer, you know, kind of guides the next line. You know, it's, you know, like I said, it's kind of like doing improv. You kind of put yourself in this corner and then you figure out a way to like get out of it. So that's sort of, you know, try to turn it into an asset somehow. Usually it'll come out with something you never could have planned because it's just like, oh shoot, what do I do now? I see I have a little more room under the most recent speech balloon. So let me have Ep say something since he's hostile towards Dav, get a little conflict in panel 1. This is on Instagram. Maybe this will help people swipe. They'll be like, oh, there's trouble here. I got to see what's going to happen next. So he thinks it's a metricocracy. So as you can see, I spelled thinks it's a kind of funny. I like spelling things in weird phonetic ways. I think that people who enjoy the strip probably sound it out loud. I think it makes it kind of interactive. There's also, you know, a long history in, you know, the tradition of comic strips of phonetic spellings. If you look at the very earliest comic strips, and I just kind of like playing with that tradition too. And the best part is, you know, as the writing is a design element, as I mentioned, there wasn't a whole lot of space here. But if you put thinks it's as one word instead of like, you know, 3 or 4, it'll fit there very nicely. All right, panel 2, here we are. I kind of come out a little bit for a little bit of a wider shot. I look at my whole, you know, I try to like, I really do compose panel by panel. I try to remind myself to look at the whole composition of the 4 panels and see like where I'm at. So kind of thinking here, you know, I'll add a few more things for Dav to say. So, you know, whereas in the first panel, I gave each character 1 speech balloon. Here I've given Dav 4 speech balloons. I like letting the one character's text play out in multiple speech balloons sometimes. It breaks up the text. It kind of helps guide the pacing. It's almost like the way that you'd use paragraph breaks in a short story or novel. If you want to really emphasize and make those paragraphs punchier, you know, break up like 1 to 2 sentence paragraphs, and you know, they kind of you know, sit a little differently on the page. So on to panel 3. You know, how about language? You know, I love using this phonetic Jewishy kind of spelling and writing. For me, like you know, like maybe many of you guys, you know, I grew up around, you know, older relatives who spoke in a way that was funny to me. And I just think like, use how your grandparents talk or the sounds that, you know, you heard in childhood. I like that stuff. I think even when it's dumb and goofy, it can be weirdly rich because it's just very much like part of who you are. So that, so that's why I didn't even do the drawing first in this one, because I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited to spell it this way. I'm just gonna put the text right down. So now I have him kind of spinning around in his frustration. So now we got 3 panels down, 1 more left. How am I gonna land this thing? That's how I always feel when I have this 1 panel left. Like, all right, so far it's, you know, I've set this up, where am I gonna go? So, okay, I'll have him like literally land. You know, he's been spinning around, how satisfying. There he is on the ground. You know, he didn't just stay in the air forever. So I'm kind of looking again, okay, what am I gonna do here? Throw Dav back in to kind of look at him. I see I've got some space on either side of Dav's head, so I'll put, you know, I'm gonna break up the speech balloon on either side there. So there he goes. And then, you know, the final panel, that's literally my most fervent yearning. Fervent yearning, I think it's always nice to end on a few words that sound nice together. Fervent yearning to me just sounds kind of nice. I think if you're looking for some advice on strengthening your writing on a phrase and sentence level, I recommend an essay called "The Sentence is a Lonely Place" by Gary Lutz, published in the Believer magazine, maybe in 2008 or 2009. Google it. I don't think it's behind a paywall at this point. And for me, it was really mind-blowing. I think it really breaks down the nitty-gritty of lovely writing just really nicely. It will explain very specifically why a phrase like fervent yearning just sounds kind of nice to hear. So that's really, oh wait, let me screen share you one more time to show you the final comic. I almost forgot. So here it is. This is what we have done. This is the final comic, all done. And then I think like, oh, thank God, I did another one. It's gonna be all right. And I posted on Instagram right away, and just, then after I posted, I'm like, oh, I made all these mistakes on it, and then move on. So, okay. Thank you all so much. I hope some of you found this helpful. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I love talking about this stuff. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Drew Lerman. And, thanks again to Neil and all the other presenters, and to everybody who's out here with us tonight. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Drew. That was great. I loved how both you and Luke were talking about doing, writing your comics in a kind of as you go along way, but they're very different methods, right? There's this stream of consciousness and editing, and then there's the commitment of improvisation. There's this is what I'm doing. That was really fantastic. We are now in the question and answer portion of the conversation. I want to encourage the participant or the panelists to chat with each other. We do have a few questions in the chat already, which I think might be a good spot to start with, and then we can move into a conversation. So the first question that came up in the chat is for Luke, and then we can move on to other folks who want to answer it. It's from Marcus, and Marcus asks, what do you think about prose and making sentences fit for your work? And I know that both Bear and Bee talked about that in a little bit, and then Drew, you were talking about some line breaks and stuff like that. So I feel like that's a great place to start. So Luke, if you want to field that.
Yeah, so the latter half of the question also is just a nice compliment. So first off, thanks, Marcus. I hope this is my best work too. I hope I'm going up and not like that or like that. That's good. But I'm not sure, Neil, do you know, can you help clarify this question, or unless Marcus can type it, or what's the specification here? I'm not sure I completely understand exactly what that means.
I'm muted. I think
I hear you.
The idea behind that was kind of about fitting your words into your work spatially. Do you when you're writing the dialogue, is it just short enough that it always fits in, or do you have to
yes, I kind of just, I don't know, I don't really think about it. I just kind of I do a lot of erasing, so I know that there's a lot of things I don't like, and I just kind of land where I do like. It's kind of just, I start with, I guess, a breakdown of in my head, I know what I want to happen, and I know by what's happening, I kind of know, judging by the characters' personalities, and it all makes sense to me. It's very abstract, but I just kind of know what the characters are going to say. And when I'm doing the panel breakdown, that usually depends on for the intro pages, it's kind of a hit or miss, because you have to set up an introduction right off the bat. But generally speaking, with at least very different from Drew, but similar to everyone else actually in the presentation, is that all of our stuff is sequential. So we have to make sure one page goes into the next, and depending on where the last page ended is where the next page starts. So I kind of just know what has to be said, and kind of just do the paneling, the panel cuts when I'm doing the storyboard. I guess I kind of just base it off of that. Yeah, I'm probably going to think about that more, though. I don't really think about how the bubbles fit in. I just kind of make it happen and kind of go where it goes. Yeah. You're muted.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Any of the other panelists want to jump in?
I'll jump in on that for a sec. So that's something I think about a lot. In terms of like fitting dialogue in a certain way, like I mentioned, I have a creative writing background, and when I first started doing comics, I would do these scripts, and the panel would be like this giant amount of text over the character's poor little head that was barely fitting into like the bottom of the panel. And it's bad. I shouldn't say it's bad comics, but it wasn't the way I wanted my comics to look. I didn't really like how they read, and it just didn't feel organic. So I think about really dialogue down to like how many letters are on top, how many. I like it if there's two lines of dialogue that are like the same number of letters, so they just like line up really perfectly. Or if I can kind of like make that spatially satisfying. So yeah, and when you start thinking that way, I think that opens you up to like getting creative, like, well, if I like spelled this word a little differently, maybe it would look nicer. You know what I mean? And that's really, I think, pleasing, and it makes your work. What I would think, the way I would think to misspell a word is different than the way you would think to misspell a word, and so it like inherently makes your work very, I think, personal to your own weird thought process. Like when you spell a word correctly, everyone does it the same, but when you misspell it, So yeah, I think just that spatial component is something I think about a lot.
Cool. Jamila or Lulu or Care, do you want to jump in at all, or we can move on to another question? No? Okay. So we have a question from Samuel for Jamila asking, have you ever been in a place where your artist wanted to change something for the better in your script and you disagreed? How do you guys come to a mutual understanding for what's best for the comic?
I honestly didn't think it was a good idea. If it's ever, like, I've always, whenever an artist has changed something in the script, I'm like, oh, this is way better. What was I thinking? Is usually how it is. So I don't know, but I really focus on communicating really well with my artist. And so if I was in that situation, I don't know. I feel like I would just go with what the artist decided. Like I'm working with them because they're an artist and I am not. So I'm going to take their word for it. I think I would default to that and just move on. But I haven't experienced that yet.
Anybody else want to jump in on that question? Luke or Drew or?
Just, we wanted to jump on, actually, like, our artist fell in love with one of our characters, and we were actually going to kill off this character, but she wouldn't let us. So we had to like rework it so that this character wouldn't die. And through this collaboration, I feel like our story is a lot richer for it. Yeah. So yeah, so like we've definitely dealt with that for sure on like a fundamental level.
And it's just, again, it goes to communication. Like just having a good dialogue with your artist is extremely important.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's Sharon asks, what is one thing you wish someone told you earlier in your comics career in regards to writing?
Let it go.
Let it go.
Like just don't like comics is such a big collaboration with so many different people.
Unless you're your own artist.
Unless you're your own artist and your own bubble person and your own everything. But it's like it's so collaborative and I love the collaboration. Like I didn't understand it before, but
you're gonna have to let go of some control and you have to be comfortable with that. Again, like you said, we had our artist basically changed the story.
Yeah.
And I was very
Not okay with it at first.
for a long time, but then I came around to it, and it's awesome. So, yeah. I don't know how to end sentences.
It's okay.
Anybody else want to chime in on?
I feel like I'm still at the beginning, so I don't even know other than just like do it, just work on it, like and finish it and move on, learn from it and move on, or else you're going to be working on that comic for like 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I just want to jump on top of that, like, for 1 second, and then I promise I'll stop. But one of my best friends, Bodan, the one who I put in the yes, the best advice he ever gave to me was, if you have a good idea, don't just sit on it. Put it out there, even if it's not perfect, because if you don't put it out there at all, it's never going to exist. So that was something that really, really stuck with me.
Yeah, and like just having the experience under your belt.
Sure.
We have so many comics that we have published, like put out there, that are no longer canon, but we wouldn't have gotten to the point where we are now if we hadn't done it.
Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. Cool. Are we still on? I remember, Neil, you asked if anyone wanted to jump on. Is that in regards to the wish someone told us something earlier question? Okay, yeah. So I guess something that I wish this is something that I was told that I wish I'd listened to earlier. But good friend Misaki Kido, who's been kind of like just a big support in terms of my writing. She told me, like, when I first started in, I think, 9th grade was when I did my first like 40-page comic. She like made it really clear to me. She was like, you know, like, you did a good job figuring out, like, I think the demographic, but just like for future reference, like, even if you're writing something you don't want to write, or even if you're writing something you do want to write that you like are really confident is good, you know, maybe consider like 50% of it's for the reader, 50% of it's for you. Like, what are others gonna see in it, and what are others gonna take away? Like, what are you offering the readers, instead of something that's just like, you know, purely indulgent, that's just like purely self-satisfactory, which I think like a lot of my art is just like mine that I like, that's fun for me to make, but then like a lot of my stuff that I've sold and like comics that I finished, I've kind of in my head justified, like, okay, this is something like people could actually enjoy, not just something that I think is just like a brain fart that I just like pooped out of my head. So I kind of go by the rule of like 60% for me, 40% for others, or 70% for me, 30 for others. I think 50-50 is a little too low, but that's just probably like a rebellious thought. I don't know. So
Cool. I did see in the chat that both Jamila had a question for Lulu and Care, and then Lulu, you also had a question for Jamila. And if you don't remember them, I can refresh your memories.
Oh yeah, I had a question for you both. How do you approach writing as a team? Like, I've done it before, but I'm always interested in hearing how like co-writers work together, especially when it's about like starting a story and story development and stuff.
What usually happens is we sit down, we brainstorm, we get a general outline, and then I write it out, and then she tells me that it's crap, and that I have to redo it.
Because you can do better.
Because I can do better. She says I can. I don't think I can.
But you do.
So then I rewrite it, and then she looks at it again. She's like, okay, I'll fix it.
Yeah.
I'll make it better.
Yeah.
And then we give it to the artist, basically. We just do it on Google Docs. It's nothing crazy.
Yeah, but it's definitely, I mean, we both want to be happy with it, and we both want to be proud of what we're putting forth. So it has a lot of undertones of what is important to us and what we want to put out into the world. And she's a much better writer than I am. I'm better at like outlines and storyboarding and like knowing what I want and knowing, like, I'm bossy.
She's the visual.
So I'm like a manager more than other things. But yeah, I just yell at her a lot. So my question for Jamila is what sort of resources do you have like for finding an editor and also for finding someone who can when you're finding a sensitivity reader, is it always specifically to that demographic, or is it like just sort of in general?
Yeah, so for editors, I went with who I know, like just through friends and, you know, the industry and stuff. But there's cartoonistofcolor.com. There is also queercartoonists.com and disabledcartoonist.com. And those are all databases where you can search for cartoonists, but you can also filter by roles. So whether somebody's an art director, an editor, writer, artist, all that kind of stuff. So that's like, those are great resources for looking for editors or just collaborators, or just to find people to read like their work and stuff. And then the other question was about, what was it? There was another one, right?
Yeah, what was it? Oh, sensitivity reader.
Oh, yes. So I've only worked with 2 for one specific comic, and I looked through my network of friends for people who are experts in the field. So it was a couple of like, hey, I'm looking for somebody who is, you know, an expert or knows a lot about these subjects. Do you know anybody? And it was a couple of emails, threads of like, oh, try this person. And then this person's like, try them. And then so I ended up with 2 great people. And so that's how that was. That's the only experience that I've had so far.
Cool. Thanks so much. I feel like actually we're sort of like hitting the end of our time. We didn't get to all of the questions, but I hope that's okay. We'll hopefully have more conversations like this in the future. So, you know, first, I really wanted to thank everybody for joining us. It looks like Ashley that posted the links to the Cartoonists of Color database, the Queer Cartoonist database, and the Disabled Cartoonist database that Jamila had just mentioned. I am pasting in links to the folks who presented today, as well as a link to Radiator Comics Studio. So all of the presenters have comics that you can purchase. So I encourage you to visit their websites and do so. Be on the lookout for Bear and Bee's Kickstarter campaign coming soon, maybe even next week. Visit their site for their comics. I am going to be pacing restlessly until Jamila and Robin Smith's Wash Day Diaries comes out from Chronicle Books. Though if you haven't read the original, you should go buy it from her. Also be on the lookout for Black Jose Press's Kickstarter later this year for Robin's Saddest, Angriest Black Girl in Town. Also be on the lookout for new work by Luke at the end of the year, and visit Luke's website, shopjamo.com, where you can pick up a bunch of prints and stickers and comics. And then Drew, you can check out his comics on Instagram. He's currently selling his Snake Creek books and a new comic called Detective Double Digest comic. All proceeds for the Snake Creek books purchased directly from Drew will be donated to Dream Defenders throughout the month of July. And the first $250 in sales from Detective Double Digest comic, which was just released this week, will be donated to the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. And Real Easy Press, who printed and published the comic, will be doing a matching donation for that. Anyone interested in purchasing books and contributing to these causes can direct message Drew on Instagram or Twitter. The next Nuts and Bolts is July 14th, at which we'll be talking about penciling comics. Joining us will be Remus Jackson, Mar Julia, and Estrella Vega, 3 amazing cartoonists. We have more programming scheduled for the end of July and into August and onward into the rest of the year that we'll be announcing soon. And every Friday, we host a drop-in open studio work session from 4 to 6 p.m. For you to make time for your comics. All the information about Radiator Comics programming can be found at radiatorcomics.com/studio. I want to encourage anyone who's interested in getting involved with Radiator Comics Studio to get in touch. We want to know who's making comics and who wants to make comics. And we're always open to programming suggestions and proposals. My email address is neil@radiatorcomics.com. There's a contact form on our website, and you can also find us on social media. So thanks once again to everybody for joining us, and thanks so much to Bear and Bee, to Drew Lerman, to Jamila Rowser, and to Luke Stewart. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.